Hello everyone. In this video we're going to look at some shelf tool examples. We will cover how to change a node graph appearance, how to set up a template importer, and how to change parameters on nodes of a certain type. These are fairly simple examples, but will give you some ideas on how you can build workflows that simplify your pipeline, and with a few lines of code, tedious repetitive tasks become a simple shortcut key. Let's start with something silly to demonstrate how we can easily change the appearance of the node graph. We'll be using the Napo scene that will be provided, so you can follow along. Let's go up to our cogwheel here, and we've already created our testing shelf, and we can add some more code. So add new item, and we'll call this node colorize. I'll say it randomly colorizes our nodes, and we'll give it a keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-C. And for the icon, I've made an icon already. It's in my pictures directory, and it's this rainbow.png, just to show that it changes all the colors. And we're going to enter that in here, and rainbow.png. And I'm just going to change the slashes to be the other way around, otherwise it will complain. This is in Windows, but it actually will work better if we use the slashes the other way. And then it's going to open up in my editor, and you can see the name, and there's my icon and the shortcut, and there's a description, and we're going to put in our code here. So the first thing we want to do is import random. And we're going to use the random module to randomize the colors for every node. And now we need to get all the nodes, so we're going to have a variable called nodes, and we're going to use the node graph API, and we're going to get all nodes. And now we want to do a for loop for all of our nodes, and we're going to have a variable called node. And now we want to create a random number between 0 and 1 for our red, green, and blue. So there's red, green, blue. Next, we're going to use the drawing module, and we will do set custom node color, and we'll give it our node and our colors: red, green, and blue. Now, after our loop is finished, we now need to tell the node graph it needs to refresh because we've changed all the colors. So we're going to use the node graph API again, and we use set needs redraw to true. Okay, and let's save that. Control S, and we'll jump back to Katana. We'll click our cogwheel, and we have our new code here, and we can click it, and you can see it changes all of our colors. And we can also test our shortcut, Control-Alt-C. There you go. Easy peasy. Okay. Let's now look at a more practical example of a shelf tool. We'll import a template. So I've already set up a folder that has these 4 files in that are version controlled, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what we'd want to do is look inside this folder to find anything that is of .katana, and then present a dialog box where the user can pick which version they want to load in, with the default being the latest version. Once they select that, it will import the nodes, and then they can place it inside their Katana scene. So let's hop back to Katana now, and we're going to add a new item. Let's call this template importer. And we'll say imports templates. And we'll do Control-Alt-T for template, and we'll hit OK. We then get our template importer.py file that we can add our code to. So the first thing I'm going to do is import glob. So we'll use glob to look in the directory to find all the .katana files. and then give it the template location. and that's in my user directory, documents, Katana templates. But then use OS to change the directory to that. And now we can use glob to find all the Katana files, and we'll store that in a variable called Katana files. So glob.glob. We'll say anything that ends in .katana. Now what we want to do is have an import dialog pop up with all of those Katana files as an option, and we'll return those results into two variables. One is item, so which one you chose, and OK if you hit OK. And now we're going to use qt widgets dot q input dialog, and we use get item, and parent will just say none, so it'll just be floating. Next, the title, we'll call it import template. Next, we'll give it a location as the label. Next is our list of Katana files. Next is the index, so we'll take the length of all of our Katana files, and -1. And that will pick the last one in the list. And finally, we'll say editable equals false. And that is our dialog box. So if you hit OK, then we'll load in the Katana file. So we use Katana file.import and give it the item, so which template you chose, and we'll store that result in a variable called nodes. And now we can use the node graph tab. So we can get that using ui4.app.tabs and then find top tab, and we'll give it node graph. So if there is a node graph tab that exists, so if node graph tab, then we can use the node graph tab and float nodes and give it the nodes that we've imported. And that is it. So let's save that and see what happens. We're going to jump back to Katana, and we're going to hit our template importer, and it presents this lovely dialog box. It's selected the latest version of 4, but you could choose any other version if you wanted to. And you hit OK. And there's our floating nodes. And then you can just plop it down, and away you go. Okay. For this example, we're going to go back to the original Napo scene. And if we look at the end of the scene, where we have our render nodes, there are a lot of PRMan object statement nodes, which are setting a location to be mat yes. Now, what if instead we decide that we want to change all of these PRMan object statement nodes to be mat no and visibility no? So instead of manually going through each and every single one of these nodes, we could write a script that will find all of these node types and change those parameter values. So let's go and do that. So we're going to create a new item, and let's call this PRMan object statement update. And we say, well, change all POS nodes to mat no and camera. No. Just do Control P. Okay. And this brings up our Python file where we put our code in. So the first thing we want to do is get all the PRMan object statement nodes, and we're going to store that in a variable called POS nodes. And we're going to use the node graph API to get all modes by type of PRMan object statements. Now we've got those two locations, so if we just jump back to Katana, we hover our mouse over, we can see that that parameter is PRMan statements attributes mat, and this one is PRMan statements attributes visibility camera. So we're just going to make two variables to store those locations so we can use them. So let's go back to our code, and we're going to have one which is for our mat and one is for our camera. Now we want to cycle through these nodes. And the first thing we want to do is grab hold of the mat param. So mat param is equal to, and we've got our POS node, and we want to use get parameter of our mat location. Now, if we have our mat param, then we'll do something, and then we can also do an else. So if we can't find the mat param, we can let the user know that they couldn't find it. I'll just come back to that in a sec. So we want to get the parameter here is one of these dynamic parameters where you have the top level mat, but then you have its enable and value parameters underneath the child parameters. And this is where you get this sort of local selection and default. And what we'd want to do is grab hold of its enable parameter and its value parameter to see if they are both on. So let's do that. So enabled equals param equals mat param dot get child param of enable, and value param equals mat param dot get child value. So if the enabled param get value at 0 is equal to 1, and the value param get value at 0 is equal to 1. So if they're both enabled, then we want to set the value param to be 0 at 0. That's basically going to set the mat to be no. And then we want to do the camera param now. We're going to get the parameter, and now we want to get the camera parameter location, and we'll do the same thing. We will get the camera param get child of enable. We want to set that value to be on, so 1 at time 0, and we'll do the same thing for the value, and we'll set that to be off, so it's going to be invisible to camera. And finally, we can do our else statement, and we can do a qt widgets dot q message box, and we'll make a warning, and we'll set the parent to be none, title to be warning. The message could be could not find our variable on node variable and dot format that with our two variables of the mat param location and the current POS node, and we'll get the name of that. Okay, and we'll just have that warning come up once, so we'll break out of all of the loop. Let's save that, and then let's hop back to Katana. So you can see these are all currently set to mat, and we're going to run our code, and we should see this change to no, and the visibility be enabled, and that be set to no. So let's give that a whirl now. And there we go. Mat is no, camera is no for all of our POS modes.